They get you down for a day or so, then you're fine. This year, no colds. I've had no cold since over a year ago. Why is that? Maybe it's because I'm keeping away from people, I'm wearing a mask, and I'm washing my hands.
Mm-hmm.
Because a virus is a virus. I mean, some are worse than others, but a flu virus and the coronavirus are both, you get them in the same way. Let's just say that.
I put this up fairly often because this is why I don't argue with people. But you can look it up. It's Proverbs 14, verse 7. Go from the presence of a foolish man while thou perceivest not in him the lips of knowledge.
There you go. There you go.
Something else I said with this is that reasonable people can disagree. Unreasonable people can only be unreasonable.
That's pretty basic. And again, I have to agree. Sometimes you can just say, hey, let's agree to disagree and then talk about something else. I know politics have been that way the past maybe 4 years, okay? And they're still that way, and they're getting worse. But that doesn't mean just because I'm on the right and you're on the left, that doesn't mean that we can't have a civil conversation about it or a civil conversation about something else. Agreeing to disagree is something that I think we need to do more of, to do it better. And we're a diverse society. We're a diverse country. There is no country with more diversity than the United States. And it's just not our race, our where we came from. It's what we believe and who we are. So if we're respectful of everybody, and I try to be respectful of everybody, I think more good things can happen. I tend to be a glass half full person. It's hard to find positive things about this pandemic, but I think there are. Me personally, since this whole thing started, I've been to the gym 3 times a week. I don't think I've been in physically this kind of shape in 25 years. There's a positive because I'm not traveling, so I get to go to the gym all the time. Is that a glass half full way to look at things? Maybe.
Well, agreeing to disagree is fine, but I think better is finding a common ground in which no one is happy. That sounds ridiculous, but that's often the right answer, and we've lost the art of compromise, which served us well for a long, long time.
Well, I think finding common ground where nobody is happy, finding common ground where everybody doesn't get everything that they want. I think that's something we should strive for. There's not been a politician ever that I've agreed with 100%. I don't agree with myself 100% of the time. Okay. But compromise is how you get things done. You don't need to go all the way to one end of the spectrum and shut down everything like they have in Los Angeles. That's ridiculous. They've shut down that whole city, and they have one of the highest COVID rates in the country. But by the same token, you just can't go around like this thing, like it's the flu, because that's not the way to do things either. Living in Missouri, I actually think we've done a pretty good job here in this state by letting people kind of do what they think is best. And I think for the most part, we have.
I'm not sure about that. I think basically the thing I'm most disappointed with over the last year is there are very few things that I can't tolerate for a small time. There are very few people I cannot tolerate for a small time. And, having worked as a journalist and been sent out to do interviews with people that, I may have absolutely nothing in common with whatsoever, but there's still a story. There's still something I have to report. I think, and people do not want to tolerate anything except their own way for any time whatsoever. The other thing that has really disappointed me is the fact that human beings over this COVID thing have seemed to have lost all use of reason. They do something because a celebrity does it, or they don't do something because a celebrity does it. It just has really brought out the fact that there are so many people who really are not thinking anymore. They're just reacting. And I think when you get two sets of people with different viewpoints just reacting, not thinking about anything, it's impossible to me to have the United States under a rule of unreason and a rule of it's okay for this guy, but it's not okay for you. I mean, basically, and obviously the rule of tolerance. I mean, I'm sure those folks that does the convention to put together the Declaration of Independence and the Constitutional Convention, they really had a lot of differences. They had a lot of, but there wasn't anybody who said it's my way or the highway. And I just see that so much, and that's just really a disappointment to me in humans.
How much of that do you think is, for a year now, we can't do what we want to do. We're a free people. We're used to doing what we want to do, when we want to do it, and how we want to do it. And I think even people who are all the way to one end of the spectrum on this, as far as thinking that most things need to be open, they understand that, okay, I'm not going to be going to a baseball game or a hockey game or a football game. I can't go to my local pub. I'm not going to be able to go to a rock concert. The restaurant that I love, it's 50% capacity. I can't get in tonight. The common everyday things that we've learned to perhaps take for granted, we don't have those anymore. And I just wonder how much pressure that's put on people and push them over the edge. I wonder how much of it is that. Because I see what you're seeing too, as far as people not being accepting of other ideas.
Well, one thing, and I'll maybe make a little bit of a personal note here. Eugene was working. He was for 15 years. He was in Jefferson City. Mm-hmm. Came home on the weekends, and our marriage did perfectly fine that way. The last year, I can about count the days that we haven't seen each other. And obviously we love each other very much, but you're very much right. At some point you just have to say, hey, I'm going for a walk. I'm out of here for a while. Yeah. And, and it's not because the two sides can't get together. It's just because the stress of all the you got to do this versus what you want to do. The two keep butting heads, and that doesn't do very well for anyone's peace of mind or able to, just smile and walk away from it at all.
Yeah, I that's exactly what I'm talking about. Not this last Saturday before that. My dear wife and I thought, because we're not going to restaurants, we've been frequenting the restaurants that we normally go to, but with carry out to help them along. So we still have date night on Saturday night. It's just that it's a very romantic takeout dinner. How's that? But we said, you know what? The heck with it. Let's go out to a restaurant. And we went out to eat. And they did a good job of, keeping the table spread apart and everything else. And the waiter was very cordial and very respectful. But we just had to go out. We had to go out to dinner. So we said, the heck with it. If we get COVID, we get COVID. Let's go out to dinner. We just got to do it.
Yeah, and this is what I find very frustrating about the lack of cooperation. people argue all around, but Wuhan, China, where this all started, is back to business as normal. In fact, they're spreading the rumor that it started someplace else. But why? They cracked down. They all cooperated. They got it done in the first place, and it was over with. Now, that's a autocratic state that I wouldn't want to have here. But the fact that we would not cooperate to nip this in the bud has brought us to where we are. We're on the third wave. China had one, and it was gone. It's looking like that. South Korea had one, and it was gone. It's looking like that might be the case with India, but with 1.3 billion people, I'm not making that prediction yet.
The South Korea point you make, they're a Western society. They're an Asian culture, but they're a Western society. I believe their numbers. Any number coming out of China that Mr. Xi had to look over, I wouldn't trust that at all. I just wouldn't trust it. They did crack down in Wuhan because if you didn't do as they said, they tied you up, they threw you in a van, they took you away, and possibly you were never seen again. And India, well, I just don't know that I don't know that they can count the number of cases. They're a very poor country. So the numbers that come out of India, I don't think they're lying. I don't think they're deceiving. I just don't think they got bigger fish to fry than to count people with COVID-19. So China numbers, India numbers, I'm not sure that I would believe those.
Even if you don't trust the absolute numbers, India was catching up to us and then turned it around and their numbers started going down. If they were making a mistake, they should be making the same mistake, and the number may be not what they're saying, but it shouldn't have reversed direction unless they actually did something.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If their numbers are saying that they're reversing direction, I don't know how accurate their numbers are. Just because of the third world country that they are, they have bigger fish to fry than to count numbers. Korea, Japan, Taiwan, sure, I believe those numbers. They're a first world, in some cases, second world country that pretty much does things the right way. But again, those are the differences in societies. You can't. If you take our way of life, you have to take our way of life 100%. And we're not going to be the way that an Asian culture is because we're not an Asian culture.
Well, I just think that if we'd have pulled together, we wouldn't have been putting up with this for a year.
Oh, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%.
They're back where they're having to in Europe, but they had a pretty good summer because their numbers were way down because they nipped it. They pulled together on it.
Well, I read an interesting story, and this came out of Italy because originally Italy, they were the first country where the numbers went through the roof, both in cases and deaths. A lot of that was because they have a much older society, and the disease affects the older a whole lot worse than it does the young, okay? But numbers started to drop, and people started to comply. And they asked them, how come all of a sudden now you're deciding to do the right thing? And they interviewed a lot of people, and they all basically said the same thing. They said, look, here's how we are in this country. The government told us to do this. And we're very contrary. We're not going to do anything the government's. I mean, how many governments have they had in Italy since World War II? I think 60 governments they've had. In fact, the Prime Minister of Italy just resigned again, so they have to form a new government again. That was just this week. But they're just as a people, they're not trusting at all. They said, but here's what they did. Then they stopped saying you just have to do this. They say, you need to do this because of that. They gave us a reason, and we thought about it. We thought, you know what? That makes sense. And then they started to comply. But that's just how Western societies are. That's just how we are, for the good or for the bad. I mean, we have to take the good with the bad.
I think one of the issues, James, is the fact that you can't see the virus. this country obviously, the